So, as James very helpfully introduced as we arrived at church this morning, we are here today to talk to you about opening doors. The Opening Doors is the name that we give to our building project, so we thought it would be really helpful to share with you where we began and where we're going. So we're going to have a bit of Q&A where I'm going to grill James a little bit about our project. So my first question, James, today is, the Opening Doors project, where did it all begin? What was the start? How did we get where we are?
Thank you. I think that the easiest way to start is to say the project started 12 years ago, which feels like a very long time ago. And when I looked back when I was doing 12 years ago, I was still in my curacy, which feels like a very long time ago. Many things have happened since then. And it started with the faithful people here in St Cuthbert's, and a few who are no longer with us now, who developed this amazing vision for St Cuthbert's building. And the vision came out of, in many senses, the drawbacks of our building. Many of them you will know. We have a very imposing entrance. We have some incredibly steep steps as you enter. There are no toilets in the building, as you know. There's a lack of space where we can host concerts or events. And from there came a vision to open up our doors to our community, to enable organisations in the music and art sector and even businesses to be able to take advantage of the amazing acoustics and, I would say, aura of this building. So our architect was commissioned to draw up plans of what this might look like and how we might be able to use our building to put the soul back into the heart of Darlington, as someone coined that phrase for me recently. So 12 years ago, we developed plans to take out the pews, to move the font from the south transept to near the west door, to change the entrance lobby to be much less imposing and much more attractive for those looking in from the outside, and to make our entrance accessible for everyone, and to put in some wonderful heating, to put in some toilets, and to put in a server. So this was not my idea. This was the idea of the faithful people of St Cuthbert's a decade ago, and it's one that we have pursued ever since.
So it started quite a long time ago then, 12 years ago. I don't know if any of you are thinking what my next question might be, but why has it taken us 12 years to get to where we are now? What's been happening?
It's a brilliant question. I think fundamentally the answer to your question lies in what so many people outside the church think of when they think of church. They think of the church roof. That's what many people think of when they think of the church. We discovered that 3 of our roofs were highly defective. So much so that we were put on the Heritage at Risk register. Because fundamentally, there wasn't much point in transforming the inside of our building if we weren't watertight. So 2 significant roofing projects began in 2014 and 2018, which cost £500,000 to repair, and we also threw in a new boiler the year before as well.
So when did you arrive, and what was the next stage for you when you did get here, James?
Well, in the sequence of roofs, I arrived after 2 had been repaired, and as you may know, we repaired the last one last year, in 2024. I arrived here in St Cuthbert's back in April 2021, just as we as a church were coming out of COVID, and we were just starting to have in-person services here at St Cuthbert's.
So in that time, James, you arrived, and then St Cuthbert's, as some of us will know, was designated a resourcing church by the diocese. So when did that happen?
There was initial conversations about this back in 2019, but they didn't really come to much. And then the diocese started having conversations with me about 3 months after I arrived, and it became a reality in October 2022.
But for those of us that are not familiar with that term, what does it mean then for them to designate St Cuthbert's as a resourcing church with you as leader here?
They are such simple but really, really important questions. I think in its simplest terms, a resourcing church is where a church is given more resources. That's how we can employ staff here at St Cuthbert's, so that we can revitalise St Cuthbert's. We can get growing as a church again. That's both a numerical thing, that's also in our discipleship and what it means to follow Jesus. And then ultimately, down the line, we hope to be able to resource others in Darlington and in the diocese. So it's a little bit like a financial investment would be, as you might understand it. You invest something into St Cuthbert's, but you always expect a return as a result, don't you? Same thing.
But that's a lot about people and resource and finance of people. So what impact does it have being a resourcing church on our Opening Doors building projects?
Ah, yes, very important, thank you. As part of the resources we were given as St Cuthbert's, we were given a large grant towards our Opening Doors building project. But I think I want to say something else happened as well at that time. Because my job here as leader of St Cuthbert's became to revitalise the church, to get it growing again. And we started to see the building project in light of this bigger vision that we started to develop as a church. And we developed a vision all about transformation that I know many of you will be familiar with. About transforming us as people, about transforming our building, and about being part of transforming the town of Darlington. And if we are to achieve a revitalised St Cuthbert's, then transforming our building becomes a pivotal to this whole thing. Because a new, accessible, flexible space will be key to our mission as a church. Will be key to inviting the people of Darlington in. Will be key to using our glorious building to point to our glorious God. So in many senses, 12 years ago we started with a vision for our building. But most recently, that's been developed into a vision for our church.
That's really exciting to hear the journey that we've been on so far. We've still got more to say about what is going to come. But I wonder, James, as we think about how exciting this is, where do you feel God has been within all of this?
That's a brilliant question, and it's really important that we bring it back to God. Ever since the Resourcing Church thing kind of came about, I felt that God wanted to take us as a church on a journey, or perhaps needed to take us on a journey if we were to get growing as a church again. And I was drawn to the passage from Joshua that we heard earlier. I preached on it way back in May 2023, so that's over 2 years ago. And I felt like God was saying that we were like the people of Israel in the Old Testament. We were camped on the banks of the Jordan River. And God was asking us to cross the river into a new and prosperous land. But in that story, crossing the river took courage for the Old Testament people of Israel. They had to trust God, and they had to trust their leader, Joshua. They had to consecrate themselves. We read that earlier. And they had to make sure they didn't repeat the mistakes of the past. The people of Israel found themselves an extra 40 years in the wilderness because of some of their past mistakes. I felt like God was saying to us, just like he said to Joshua, be courageous, for the Lord your God is with you. So cross the river into a new land. And I think that is what we've been doing for the past 2 years. We have been crossing the Jordan. And the people of Israel were only able to cross the river if they allowed the presence of God, the Ark of the Covenant as it was for them, to go for them. That's why we talk a lot about prayer here in St Cuthbert's, because we know that God must go before us. And I think that's at the root of our story.
That's the first sermon I heard. I arrived the week after that sermon was preached. I've still got a copy of it if anyone wanted to read it. But I think I've got to ask James, have we crossed the Jordan? Like, are we at the other side of the river, do you think, metaphorically here at St. Cuthbert's?
That is a question way beyond my pay grade, I think. And my instinct says we are still crossing the river. And the Opening Doors project is, I think, is part of that crossing. Maybe when we complete the building work, then that will signal that all the people have crossed the river and will join in with Miriam's song, who knows. But transforming our building is part of our vision, and that feels pivotal to the journey that we're on.
So let's take us back to some practical questions around the Opening Doors project. How much does a project like this cost? And what is our funding plan?
Thank you. The Church of England, when they invested, made us a resourcing church, gave us a very, very generous grant of £1 million. The project back in June last year was billed to cost £1.7 million. And our plan was of raising the extra 700,000 was from a lottery grant, was from the government VAT scheme, and from a number of organisations who are grant-making trusts, and also from inviting the community to be able to contribute to the project as well.
That's a lot of money, and we're not going to stay there with those figures, I'm sure, because a lot of hard work went into that fundraising. Do you remember when you told us that we had some setbacks late last year? So what happened then?
We did indeed have some setbacks. Back in December, the project cost increased by £300,000, and then in February, the government all but in name scrapped its VAT rebate scheme, which put us back another £275,000. So now the project cost is £2.3 million.
So we went from needing 1.7 to 2.3 million. So where does that leave us today? Where are we at?
In the last 6 months, we've made some really, really important and good and bold strides since those setbacks. The Church of England has offered to cover the cost of the VAT scheme and a little bit more, which we're very grateful for. We're applying for a second lottery grant, but that has hit some snags, so we're not quite sure of that. And we have since submitted over £200,000 worth of applications to grant-making trusts. And we got some really good news from one of those last week. So we feel that we have made significant progress. We still need another kind of 200, maybe £250,000, but we do have a plan to bring that money in, and we think it's possible. So the PCC, a couple of weeks ago, made a decision to go ahead with the project with a starting date of January 2026.
So this is really significant. I'm just going to repeat that. So the PCC have agreed to go ahead with the project as of January 2026. And in some ways we're stepping forward in faith, James, because we still need that extra £200,000 to £300,000. It's really, really exciting. It's really, really significant. And of course, the projects are going to need big changes for us here at St. Cuthbert's. Probably one of our biggest changes for over a century. So it feels really important. What is the biggest, most important question then that you're sitting with as we acknowledge where we are today? So what is your question?
I think the question I am sitting with today is, well, I think you're right. It feels big, I think is what it feels to me. It feels big because this will be the biggest change in St. Cuthbert's in a century. It feels big because it's a long sought after project by the faithful members here of St. Cuthbert's. It feels big because people have been dreaming of this for a long time. It feels big because it's now £2.3 million. It feels big because the church will be a building site for about 12 months. So it just feels very big. And I think into that context, how we as a church communicate with you primarily, also wider stakeholders as well, and how we hear people's views, I think becomes the most important thing at this moment for where we are.
So do we have a plan for that? Do we have a plan for how we're going to hear well?
I think that in many senses today is the beginning of that. Why Steph and I are holding this microphone is because we are recording this so that we can make it available to as many people as possible. So for those who weren't able to make it today, for those who may just be interested, we will make this available and encourage as many people as possible to watch this, to listen to this, so that we can get as many people up to speed where we're at as possible. We've already kind of committed to a couple of congregational meetings on the 14th of September and the 23rd of November. And we want, in many senses, to hear from you, to get feedback from you. And in many senses, that's what we want you to do right now, just for a couple of minutes. I've talked a lot at you for the last, I don't know how long, but I want you in a minute to turn to your neighbour, to turn to your neighbours, whoever's on your queue or who's behind you, whatever. And we want you to have what we're going to call a we conversation. Now the we bit is, if you're Scottish, then you understand this. A we means short conversation, just for a couple of minutes or so. But just start with, what have you heard? What did you like? What do you not quite sure about? And most importantly, what are your questions? What are your questions are the things that we really, really want to know. Those are super, super important for us. And so we put a couple of pieces of paper and some pens at the sort of beginning of your rows. So if you can find those, we'd love you to write down your questions. And we've put a little question box at the back for you to pop your questions in. We'll start today. That box will be there for the next few months as you can put your question in any time. But we want to hear what your questions are. And our hope is that we will answer as many of them as we can on our first congregational meeting on the 14th of September. So just for, I'm going to say go, which is your instruction, just for literally 2 minutes, chat to your neighbour about what you've heard, share your questions, and if you can, put them on a piece of paper, and then we'll put them in the box in the second half service. Go.
Right, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed having those wee conversations there, that little bit of a start about what I think is going to be quite a long conversation that we're going to keep having over the coming months. I really want to encourage you to write down your questions, your thoughts in the box so that we can address them, because we're going to have lots of questions, some practical, some bigger, all around the Opening Doors project. So here are some that we're already aware of. We're going to rush through quite a list that me and James and some others have already been thinking about. When will we move out of church? Where will we worship? What about baptisms, weddings and funerals?
How will it feel to worship at our building for a year? Will the car park still be available? No. Will we be able to fit in the church hall?
How long will the building project take? Will it actually be delivered on time? Where are we going to store all of the stuff from church? What is going to happen to the pews? Can I buy a pew? Will the bells still be able to ring?
Will we get progress reports? Who will do the work? Are they reliable? How will we leave? How will we return? Well,
where's the rest of the money going to come from? Who's going to manage the project? How can we ensure that we work towards our vision with a big building project like this taking place?
What will it feel like if we think about the people of Israel? Will it feel like the Old Testament people living in exile? Or will it feel like Nehemiah rebuilding the temple? With our doors more open once the work is done, of course, how we share our building well with the community. What will our new building look and feel?
Questions. And they are just the beginning, the ones that we've thought about already. But we can't stress this enough. Your questions are important. It reminds us, though, that it is going to be a challenging time, but filled with opportunity. So in the face of so many questions, and it being a little bit tricky and not certain about what is going to come, James, as our vicar here, I wonder what you want to say to us as a church.
Thank you. I think I'm always conscious, I'm sure we all are, that we are always dependent on God. It's God who makes things happen, not us. But when times are hard or tricky, then we are even more dependent on God. Perhaps we're more aware of our dependence on God, if you like. It takes me to our other reading from John's Gospel about the vine and the branches. And this is a passage that seems to have become a little bit of a St Cuthbert's passage. We seem to keep revisiting it a little more often than we might imagine. So what is it I want to say to you? I think I want to speak to you from there. 3 things. Firstly, we must abide in the vine. We must intentionally root ourselves in Jesus. We need to be with Jesus, as we've been talking about over these past few months. We want to be a people who don't just say we're dependent on God, but we demonstrate it. We live it out. It's back to that prayer thing that we talked about earlier. So the first thing is abide in the vine. Second one comes from the gardener, the father being the gardener. Pruning is good for us. It's the father who prunes the branches in the analogy. Now the branches in the analogy are us. So we are the ones being pruned. And we are being pruned so that we can become more fruitful. And I think we've lived a little bit of this pruning. We've had a delay of 7 months of this project, as I'm sure you are aware. And that has felt like pruning. But in those 7 months, we've seen quite a lot of fruit here at St Cuthbert's. So I want to encourage us that we need to accept the pruning, accept the challenges, because that may well be the Father doing the pruning. I think there are other areas where pruning has also happened, but it's really important that we accept that pruning can be good for us. And then thirdly, pruning is hard. It is. Just like some of the realities of negotiating this project will be hard. But they are also an opportunity. An opportunity for us all. An opportunity to grow, an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to grieve, an opportunity to have joy, an opportunity to remember where God has been at work within us, an opportunity to share, an opportunity to celebrate the new coming in, an opportunity to dream, an opportunity to allow God to determine the future. So I think this Opening Doors project is an opportunity for us to step into a new chapter at St Cuthbert's, a chapter that I think Cuthbert himself would approve of. And why do I say that? Because our Opening Doors project is fundamentally about mission. It's about us looking outwards and authentically sharing the good news of Christ, which is exactly what Cuthbert was about. So what do I want to say to us? Abide in the vine. Commit to prayer, both individually but also corporately as a church. Embrace the pruning. Because if it's the Father who does the pruning, and pruning is going on, that means that God is at work amongst us. And we should celebrate that. Because I genuinely believe that God is at work amongst us here at St Cuthbert's.
So you've given us so much information about the Opening Doors project, where we started, where we're going, where we're headed. We probably got more questions maybe than when we arrived. But what can we do? What can we be doing right now as we finish?
Really important question, because we need to make this as practical and as tangible as possible. We're an Anglican church, so I've got 3 words for you. Worship, pray, give. That's what I want to say to you. Worship, because I am convinced that God is in this vision that we have as a church, in this journey of transformation that we're going on. And so I want us to continually keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, and we do that by worshipping God. You may have noticed in the notice sheet, I've deliberately set up an evening of prayer and worship on the 13th of August, because I want to honour God. I want to acknowledge where God has been at work in our fundraising so far. I want to tangibly mark the fact that God is in this and is blessing and guiding us. And we do that through worship. Just like the Old Testament people of Israel, what they would do is they would build an altar to mark the fact that God had appeared to them. And I think that's what that is about. That's just putting a marker in the sand and saying God has been with us, and we want to acknowledge that. So I invite you, I encourage you to come on the 13th of August, on that evening, to worship, to pray, and to honour God. That's worship. Pray, that's abide in the vine. We've talked about that already. And finally, give. We've still got 200, maybe £250,000 to raise. We've got some plans in place that will bring us closer to that, but we specifically want to give us all the opportunity to be able to give to that project in whatever way that looks like for us as individuals in our own circumstances. So we're planning a gift day that will happen in the autumn, where we will invite everyone to give according to their means, to be able to partner with us in transforming our building. And we'll give you options on how you can contribute in different ways. The detail will come. But for now, I invite you to pray, how is God inviting you to be part of this as well? What do I want you to do? To worship, to pray, and to give.
So, church, today we've heard that our Opening Doors project that has been in the pipeline for 12 years has had the go-ahead from the PCC to start instructing our builders and contractors, and our plan is that we will close as of January for our building project to get underway so that we can see this building transformed for the mission of God in Darlington. So thank you, James, for everything you've shared with us so far. I really want to encourage us to keep writing down our questions, the things that we're excited about, the things that we're worried about, as we continue to walk on this journey together. But as we do all of that, we give thanks and praise to God, because all glory belongs to Him. And it is through His grace and through His provision that we're able to share this news with you. So in the spirit of that, we're going to invite Paul forward, and Paul is going to lead us in our time of prayer as we pray about the world, our community, and very specifically our Opening Doors project. So do join me and Paul as we come and pray together.